deep, a very serious.
Good morning, everyone, esteemed guests from the American Academy in Jerusalem. It is a great honor to present Susan Korda, the American Academy guest in Jerusalem. I'll tell you a little bit about Susan. She's going to give the talk, Kill Your Darlings. Susan Korda is a New York-based filmmaker who directed, produced, and edited the award-winning documentaries Vienna is Different and One of Us. She has worked as an editor and story consultant in the US, Europe, South Africa. Most notably, she edited the Academy Award-nominated documentary For All Mankind. She has worked with filmmakers such as Alan Berliner, and she currently teaches at Columbia University and gives and runs the Edit Studio at the Berlinale Talents campus. So please have a warm welcome, Susan Korda.
Thank you. Thanks. So hi, I just want to say it was very complicated getting a lecture together for the likes of you. I want to have a show of hands if possible. How many of you are documentarians? Yeah. I know, yeah. Because you're still deciding, right? Animators? Whoa. And then this is a general one. How about storytellers? Yay, okay, good. How many of you saw Capturing the Freedmans? Oh, good. Capturing the Freedmans, right? That was for some of you documentarians. Okay, this is not a lecture on Capturing the Freedmans. I'm sorry, I dropped the ball, meaning I made the mistake, because it's unpacking documentary in editing. Is just is very complicated. I'm going to address it, but I'm going to approach editing from the narrative, using narrative clips, Bonnie and Clyde and Jaws, just so that we can start seeing through the surface of the storytelling in cinema, in this case, classic cinema. And then we're going to take a break, and I'm going to see whether I'm going to do a before and after of a short narrative that didn't really have story, but had beautiful production value. Or whether I'll further unpack for you, we'll discuss actually the writing of Capturing the Freedmans. I mean, that is the fascinating thing about documentary. It is written in the editing room. What I want to do is just take us into the process of the editing room. What is really happening there? So I like to say that when we get to the editing room, all of a sudden we get creative autism. Everything is of equal importance, whether it is that one shot that you didn't get the lighting right on, or whether it's a performance, or whether it's an interview question that you didn't ask, and you're sitting there and you're just beating yourself up as to why you didn't get this right. How many of you have had that experience? How many of you have tried a match cut? You know what a match cut is? So, you know, a match cut is like if I'm standing here and then you go to the close-up. Well, and I have got the mic here, and then I've got the mic here in the next shot, and you're trying to, right? You're going to the close-up, right? How many hours? 3 hours? 3 hours on the match cut? More, right? You know, I was doing it on a Steenbeck, so I did 7 hours. You know, it's a rite of passage, but it's totally okay. But it's actually a misnomer, which I'll go into. So why is this called Kill Your Darlings? It's called. This comes from William Faulkner, who told his writing students to be prepared to kill their darlings. Whatever you get attached to is going to distract you ultimately, is going to distract you from seeing the broader experience that you're wanting to convey. Danny Boyles from Slumdog Millionaire, right, and 28 Days, you know his films? Right? He actually sacrifices his favorite shot. Now, Danny Boyles is like the Scorsese of this time. He's so visceral. You feel his images in your gut. And he takes his favorite shot, could cost $50,000 or more, and before editing, he actually sacrifices it to the editing room gods with the hope that he will have a good film. Because it's his favorite shot, and he just sacrifices it. So How it's easier, I mean, that's one extreme, and William Faulkner in writing, it's a little easier because it's writing. I mean, it's still painful, but it's not as costly of time and money. So I'm trying to hand to you tools as to how to make your way through the morass of sitting alone. And it's always when we're alone that our demons come out, right? When we're writing, when we're animating, when we're editing, demons, right? Big time. So awareness, first we have to get aware. We have to get through that, that everything is of equal worth. And then accepting it, and then the action that takes place. So, what's my Lex card up? One of the major things, now I'm teaching, this is a lecture in an art school, so you're more about actually the experience, but very often when we, in documentaries certainly, you'll tell me animators are different. You'll tell me, you can actually call out here. Gets to showing, people show. They want to show the audience. Now the problem with showing anything to an audience is that you're talking down to them. And by talking down to them, you're also changing your rhythm. And as I like to say, so what we do is we have to give them an experience. God, I got very complicated on this. Okay, so this is what a child does. So we play. This is a dog named Rabbi Nachis. That is an angel. Or as I like to do, thank you, Rebbe. Okay, here we got silver top guy, and he sees, oh, you're trying to be like me? You can't be like me. I am me. I am better. I can be better than you because I can hop. I can hop. Well, I can hop too. No, see, you can't. See, you can't. Ha! No, I can. No, you can't. Right? If I do this long enough, you see it. Right? It begins to really happen. We do that in the editing room. We need to experience. If we go into this head place of showing, of getting rational, and in the editing room, for some reason, everybody gets rational. That's the match cut. You're trying to cut for physics, but there's no physics involved. It's an experiential, emotional, rhythmic. It's more actually like music, and in fact, I think that's the next card. Does a composer show their piece of music, or do they give you an experience? So film, whether it's experimental, animation, narrative, it is art through time. It is more like music than it has anything to do with photography. It uses all those other elements. And of course, I think you all know this, that editing is the craft, the art that comes of film. Everything else existed beforehand. Photography, sound effects for stage, obviously performance if you have that, images, music, but the juxtaposition of two moving images and what that does, that is only of film. So we get out of showing. If we go into experiencing, how many of you get oversaturated? Like you're sitting there and you can't feel it anymore? Show of hands, right? Right. So one of the ways to avoid that, I mean, there are tools. You can get up, you can take, drink of water, you can look at it from across the room instead of, change your distance in relation to the screen and all that. But essentially what you also have to do is stop getting in your head. In fact, the best way to edit is slightly hungover without a headache. You're in your gut, right? You're not in your head, and your head is like, oh, I don't know, what the, right? And God gave us digital, as far as I'm concerned, so that we can do the edit. I mean, thinking about it, the only bad editing is like the only bad writing. It's not doing it, right? If you don't do it, that's what's bad. But if you do it, you're always discovering. In fact, Alan Berliner, whose works I think you do really know, he loves to say that it's like putting two images together is creating a chemical compound. And then when you add more of them, you're creating a whole other organic chemical, well, anyway, he does, anyway, it's chemistry for him. Okay, editing's like composing. Now, anyone know Walter Murch's book, In the Blink of an Eye? Okay, so this is what I'm doing. I'm just going to give you tools here that will help. I mean, some of you as documentarians, some of you as animators, some of you as still experimental doc, experimental filmmaking. I think it applies to all. And this is really great when you've got that vertigo in the editing room and you don't know where to begin and everything is so confusing. This is something or when you're spending all that time on a match cut. So he gives us 6 points to cut for. And I'm going to go over what each one of them is. Okay, so emotion is, okay, the difference between story and plot, as E.M. Foster has said it very nicely. Plot is the queen is dead, the king is dead. Story is the queen is dead, the king died of a broken heart. Right? Very simple, one event. Events following each other is plot, story is the emotional fabric. Rhythm, eye trace. You guys learn about the 180, right? Crossing the line. I mean, that does apply in animation, obviously, when the eye gets confused. But he calls it eye trace, and we'll see the first 11 minutes of Bonnie and Clyde. Who has not seen Bonnie and Clyde? Okay, well, two people, they go off and rob banks, and it's a love story. But we're seeing the first 10 minutes, which is, I mean, what's fascinating about editing is that if you start looking at editing, like those of you who saw Capturing the Freedmans, if you start looking at the editing, which is not, editing, by the way, is not one image next to the other, but it is the sequence of events. It is the emotional ride that you're giving your audience. When you go to black, when you go to a montage, when you're giving your audience room to digest what they've just experienced. It's like pauses in music is part of the music. So editing is not the two pictures together. It's not the mistakes that we look for. That happens when we get too close to it. Editing is the thrust of the emotional journey connected to theme and obviously being addressed by the movement forward of a character and the unfolding of a story. Two-dimensional space is composition. All of you have had this where you've maybe put a light image next to a dark image or scene to scene and it bumps you, right? Because your eyes are bumped. And sometimes you think this is a mistake. And you have to be able to discern, is it a mistake? Is it throwing the experience, the viewer, out of the experience? Three-dimensional space is spatial continuity. So, these are misnomers. Match cutting is essential to making a film work. What else do I have there? All right, so the clarity, by the way, I'm just jumping very quickly because I want to buy time, but the need to explain your story before it starts. How many of us have been there? Right? Okay. It's hard to get out of, right? I mean, it is the art of story, but how do you do it then editorially as well? One is just recognizing it, right? That you're trying to unpack too much. So those who raise your hands, how many of you had seen Capturing the Freedmans? Yeah? No? That's an interesting unpacking because it's slow and it's 1 hour into that film before there's a real turn against everything that we thought to be the truth up until that time, with variations. But when the cops when we begin to really question the process of the police, is 1 hour into that film. So if you're trying to get all of Capturing the Freedmans' contradictions all out in 5 minutes, you don't have a film. All right, so, and there'll be more of that as we go on in here, because that's really one of the big bugaboos. And it's just the art of it. How do you begin a film? How do you draw us in without bogging us down? And we'll have that also just rhythmically I mean, in the beginning of Bonnie and Clyde, you'll see that very clearly. Okay, so emotions. So Walter Murch gave us percentages. I'm just going to put them up here. Right? That match cut. Whoops, sorry. 4%. 4%. I'm going to leave this up here for a little while before I start. I mean, kind of makes things easier, doesn't it? If you don't have to concentrate. So, and I've had disagreements over, I mean, I actually, in the meantime, call him Professor Murch. I disagreed with him, and I spent time analyzing films and realized he was wrong, and then realized how right he was, because he actually does say it's only in this order. And I was thinking, well, adventure films, chase films would have a different structure to it, right? Rhythm would be more important. But actually, it is ultimately the emotion that trumps everything else. So if a line of dialogue is not working, if, let's say you have a character in your documentary that you really think is important. By the way, I'm of the belief that it's not like you need to use this and then start cutting away everything in your film. I just think it's a good way to get reoriented to how you are making decisions. But if there's something that all your professors say, no, you can't have that, but your gut is saying you have to have that, of course, you got to stick with it. But you have to find out what that is. Why is that resonating so deeply? Find the tendrils to that and see how that connects. Maybe that scene just doesn't belong where you think it belongs, right? So you got that down? I mean, this is one thing. Just keep that by you whenever you're in an editing room. Put it up on the wall or something. So I'm just going to go over some basic things that you either... So this is what I mean about the principle of three. You have the foundation, then the audience recognizes it, and this is the magic. This is the sex, the understanding. When there is this relationship, we know, and we have it small ways and big ways in film. So you got that down? I'm just going to move ahead. I'm going to be readdressing this. It's like, the best example is if the curtain opens, you have a stage and you have a gun on the table. You won't see the gun on the table until somebody passes by that gun. Maybe you'll pick it up. And you won't know that that gun is important until somebody puts it in their hand, or somebody goes, oh, who put out that gun, right? And then there's an understanding that happens. Ah, that gun is going to go off. Now, of course, it's not fair to talk about a gun because they say, if there's a gun on the stage, it better go off. Okay, this is the card that we have of her. So it doesn't say she was a waitress, it says she worked in a cafe.
You going to work, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to... This is traditionally, right? This is her POV, right? Right? How many people... Now, I know this is narrative, but you still have this in documentary where you think, and you certainly have this in animation, where you think you need to motivate the shot by having her go to the window, which you could have done. I mean, there's no problem. She could have gone to the window and seen him. But this is an interesting thing. So in other words, the POV shot has to be motivated is caca. That's not true. Forget about it. Don't worry about it. Don't even go near that. You're art students anyway. You're not going to go near that. But believe me, narrative students forget about it. They get super logical, and it's not a logical thing. Now, because we can think of alternatives that would have been here. She would have gone to the window and seen him. We wouldn't have had this experience that an audience has, which is, I know something she doesn't know, which is always used in suspense. But we also use it in drama because it's not going to be extended that we know something she doesn't know. But it just allows us, it invites us in. On top of that, had Bonnie gone to the window and seen him here, this film might as well be called Bonnie and ... and Clyde. Right? It's not about Bonnie and Clyde, it's Bonnie and Clyde, right? So it's just a taste of letting us as an audience know something and then draw her in. Now we have the intercut. I call it cracking open a moment. Now you have things and you're going, I have it there, I'm showing it to the audience, right? We don't show, we experience. So how do we experience? So how do we experience this thing of when he sees her and she sees him? Now this is, when you're working with actors, you're working with figures, when you're working with characters in a documentary, and even when you're working with experimental elements, there is a subtext going on. So what is the subtext here? And this is cracking open a moment. I'm not, I turned down the sound. So we see him. She's like, oh, what am I going to do today? Damn it. Oh, the sun is out the same way. Hey. What's that guy doing? Hey, is anyone seeing him? And then it's, right, hey boy. And he's like, and we're thinking, is she naked? And he's looking up and it's like, is she naked? She's ooh, she is naked. Yeah, she's sweet. You hold it there, right? So that's called cracking open a moment, which we usually don't, by the way, the quickest interstitial dressing. And look at those, right? And those shoes, by the way, when she gets to the street and they're there, you know, she's got these little, almost like they reminded me of airline slippers. Total change of costume. Okay, but that's cracking open a moment. So you're in the editing room, you think you have this experience, but it's not coming across. So how do you, I mean, you've all experienced this or not? Yes? Some of you? You have a sense of it, right? So then you're on the right track. Because it's not an either-or thing in editing. It is, and you'll drive yourself crazy if you're looking for, and you'll never be able, it's like smelling too much perfume. You won't be able to smell it anymore if you confine yourself to finding the right cut, the right place, the cut point. The cut point will kill you because, and it's also, I really have a theory that this is very living material. If you pay too much attention to one point, it's almost like you're creating scar tissue on the body of your work. It draws attention to itself. I mean, I've worked so many workshops where I've got films in front of me and I see, I mean, I can feel the match cut. By the way, match cuts are, they're either overlaps or ellipses. They are not matches, right? So very important when you're editing is don't sweat the small stuff. Don't get caught up on you know, on small perfectious moment, trying to perfect a cut, certainly cut, or even a moment, or cut away the fat of the real lifeness of it. In documentary, very often we don't like the ums and the ahs or something of our protagonists, and we try to cut around that. Let it flow and make big changes at first. Move things around, and step back from it, from that perfectionist thing. What's the sound? Okay, now how many of you work with sound? How many of you love working with sound? Sound is your friend. Sound is all that subliminal stuff. What's the sound that you heard in this beginning scene? Did anyone notice it? So, it's put in afterwards. It's, let me go to her up here. These are the match cuts, and here's also a jump cut. That was a jump cut. Now listen. I guess we can't listen that well. Oh, it's here.
Me?
What do you think I am?
A waitress.
You hear that? They're birds, but there's also bum, 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 bum. People think it's a clock at first when they listen. I mean, you can hear it a lot better on, well, doesn't matter, it's there. And it is a oil pump, right? It's 1931 Texas, so it's an oil pump. But you don't see an oil pump. Now, when you think of sounds that they're thinking about, you could put a train in, right? That's a great sound, a train Dopplering. Right? It's a lonely, melancholy sound. But that is not what fits Bonnie. Bonnie is bored, right? So you're going to go look for a sound that reflects that. And it's not in your face. And I mean, for instance, this stuff over here, I mean, a lot of production design I won't go into, but these
The things that turn up in the street these days.
all that cotton back there, that's to hide what's back there. Right? It's just pure camouflage. And we have Bonnie's feet over here. I just want to go to a favorite thing that I have here. I mean, Bonnie is also constantly between things, like at the bed, and she's right? She's caged. We have her caged at the bed. We have her caged here. These are certain choices that they have. That famous shot. Now this one. You all felt it, right? This shot. We all felt that, right? It's like, whew, right? Now, I'm just pointing that out. I mean, it's perfectly placed. It's you know, this is a flirt. This is the first time he's going to go out. They're going to go out to do crime. This is them going into society. But it's an extreme wide shot. We've been in intimate shots with her and with them and stuff. It's beautifully placed because it takes us out and then we're back in, right? It's not like we need to go into the story of the shot. But the reason I pointed out is that what you feel when that shot went by, that is the experience. That is your antenna. That is what you, when you're in the editing room, are really getting out of your head and getting into the feeling of these. All you need to choose is what you want your audience to experience. And then you just dance with it. You're playing with the music of it. Okay, so any questions so far? So I have I'm going to talk a little bit about the writing of this, right? We see Bonnie bored. We see she's seeing this guy. They're having this flirt. He kind of gets a sense of her. She's excited, you know, right? He robs. He's excited. He obviously has issue with this because he's not a lover boy, but he is definitely attracted to her. So now we have a love scene starting, right? But we don't have one love scene starting. We have two scenes that are dealing with the love aspect, right? This is good writing. So very often you're going to find, again, documentary, animation, experimental, it's so varied I can't tell you, but you want to ask yourself, am I trying to say too much at once, right? We are journeying in. We're journeying in. So he's telling her, no, stick with me, right? You are more than being a waitress, right? And how do you know that? By the way, did you see the continuity mistake there? How do you know? Hey, boy, how do you know that? Here, let me just point it out. I mean, I love the scene, but, you know, she crosses over. He's giving her a lecture, and then he walks to collect her, right? You see them in wide shot. They're still apart, and then he walks in to collect her. Wait a second. I am in the wrong one. Okay, so.
Why? What you mean, why? Because you're different, that's why. You know, you're like me, you want different things. You got something better than being a waitress. You and me traveling together, we could cut a path clean across this state, and Kansas, and Missouri, and Oklahoma, and everybody'd know about it. You listen to me, Miss Bonnie Parker. You listen to me. Now, how would you like to go walking in the dining room of the Dolphins Hotel in Dallas, wearing a nice silk dress and have everybody waiting on you? Do you like that? Does that seem like a lot to ask? That ain't enough for you. You got a right to that.
Now you look at her hands.
Hey! When did you figure all that up?
The minute I saw you.
How many noticed it in the first screening? Some of us. How many? Right? How many cared? I mean, it is, well, maybe you cared. Okay, you know, I agree. You know, I would have cared too. I'm like going, Dee Dee, why? Because they had other things to worry about, which I'm going to get to. You know, it's like, okay. But if you stay with the emotion, right? Because you figure if 4% of continuity is important, it means that 4%, it means that only 4% of an audience is really going to pick up on it. And then you're in the next thing. You're in the next thing. And if that thing is worth it, fuck it, you know, they'll take it. So, but now we get to their big boo-boo. I'm just going to stick on this one. Now we have an intercut of faces. Well, before I go there, then he reels her in. But, okay, hardest thing to shoot and cut, and we had this whole thing in the 90s where you couldn't have a table scene without having a moving camera and having a moving camera and having, because table scenes are like the hardest thing. They're the hardest thing, and then you're talk. So if we know that this is a love story, if we know that he is winning her over, and we know in this scene it's also that, now that's her first time, right? She's been rejected, and now he's saying, you're worth so much. That more does not need to be played out in this location. Now it gets a little bit more intimate. Now they're sitting across from each other. And this is the writing at whatever amount in the film I believe we're going to get to, which is like 12 minutes in, 11, 12 minutes in, where what he's telling her is what we experienced at the beginning, right? Now you sit around and you wonder when and how is this ever going to change? And now you know, right? We know that he's right because we experienced that at the beginning. But why do we know he's right about everything else that he says before? I'm just going to play it, and I want you to look at when we cut to her, right? Because she talks beforehand. When we cut to her, it's totally, there's a subtext going on there, and you're feeling it. So this is kind of good writing, great casting coming together. Did anyone notice the focus, by the way? And right? No focus in. Now, Warren Beatty was known for like 83 takes or whatever. I mean, he was like, you know, they were losing light, but they chose the shots where it worked in the performance. It was closer because they had actually the first part of the shoot. They had a slightly different angle, which you'll see in his medium wide shots. And did you care ultimately? Some of you might have cared. But, you know, what they chose was that when it was important for him to say, and now you know, his eyes are in focus, right? So let's just look at that. Look where she's talking, and we'll play it to the end of the scene.
You're born somewhere around East Texas, right?
Yeah.
You come from a big old family?
Yeah.
You went to school, of course, but you didn't take to it much because you was a lot smarter than everybody else, so you just up and quit one day. Now, when you was 17, there was a guy who worked in a
Cement plant.
right, cement plant, and you liked him because he thought you were just as nice as you could be, and you almost married that guy. But then you thought, no, you didn't think you would. So then you got you your job in a cafe, and now you wake up every morning you hate it. You just hate it. You get on down there and you put on your white uniform.
Pink. It's pink.
Uh-huh. And them truck drivers come in there to eat your greasy burgers, and they kid you and you kid them back, but they're stupid and dumb boys with the big old tattoos on them, and you don't like it. And they ask you for dates, and sometimes you go, but you mostly don't because all they're ever trying to do is get in your pants whether you want them to or not. So you go on home and you sit in your room and you think, now when and how am I ever going to get away from this? And now you know. Change that. I don't like it. Mm. Shh. You're a knockout.
All in like 12 minutes, right? She goes like, I don't know, I'm going to work anyway, you know, and now she's like, oh, love, right? Because she feels seen, So who saw it? Why does he make her change the hairdo? Yeah, who saw it? Who didn't see it? Who saw it? Who saw it? Raise your hands. Okay, put those hands down. Who doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about? Okay, good, right? So this is called eye trace. Now this is great direction. We're just going to move right along over here, and we're going to get to that place.
You going to work, huh?
Ah, the spit curl, yes. Okay, now if we remember, now this is Arthur Penn camouflaging. He did a great job camouflaging. He got us a big round-faced woman with big round eyes and big teeth and put chewing gum in her mouth. Right? So the eye trace is basically we cross the frame like a Z. Our eyes go very quickly. Now, they could have cracked the moment open, right? Back and forth, intercut it. Or they could have let it hold longer. I mean, in any case, it might have well put it like a little red arrow that goes, look, spit curl, right? Because only 7% of the audience really sees it. So, okay, now they could have cut away from it. They could have just had him say, change that, without cutting to the waitress, right? But it's a very subtle thing because he's not making her into the woman he will love. He's making her into the woman that she will love. right? Big, big difference. Subtle. Are you getting it? No, not here. Maybe not in your eyes. You know, some of you got it. I mean, how many of you got it only the second time? Be honest. Okay. How many people got it the first time? Great. Okay, now you guys who get it the first time, you have the most difficulty in understanding that other people don't get it that quickly. You know, this is a good way of just recognizing that it's not about not having a talent, it's that this is about good sex, right? So if you're like going, you know, well, you winked at me, that's why I'm just going to jump on you now, you know, is not going to get you a good lover, you know, or a good relationship, will get you arrested, right? So your film's not necessarily going to go out. So you just, it's a good thing to keep in mind, right, right. You know, I need to breathe, you know, let me see if I just, you know, massage it a little bit, or let me live with it. Let me see. Because if they're doing a test screening, right? We're going into the editing room. If they're doing a test screening, which some of you show your friends or do in general, I have a great way of doing a test screening. That's what I think God put me on this earth for, and you will hear about it. And you're looking to see, well, did you get the spit curl? And all your test screening is about is to see that the audience got the spit curl. Are you doing service to your film? No. Right? So this is eye trace, which is 7%, because our eye can't catch it enough. That's what Walter Murch means by eye trace, not only the 180. Right? So when we're knowing that 51% emotion, it's not about her, it's about Bonnie and Clyde. It's not actually about Clyde seeing, it's about Bonnie becoming. We know that's true of the scene, right? And just to address when the camera went on her, this is the good writing, right? Because it becomes known through the film that Clyde has like a second sense. He just knows things, right? So you come from a big old Texas family, right? Yeah, and when you were 16, no, 17, that's all on his face. You decided to go, you got together with a guy who was in it, and then you hear cement factory, right? We don't cut to her. And then he goes on, and then he goes, and now you get up every day and you get into that white uniform, and then it cuts to her, pink. It's pink, right? So it's by the very mistake, let's say, right? It's by not being correct in that moment that we know how correct he is. And that's simply, you know, that's good writing, and they edited for that. And everything you're seeing, if you listen to the dialogue when he's talking and you're seeing her, they really did some sound edits. That's a nice thing about old films. You can really hear sound edits. Okay.
Alex Kinder is the kid who was missing at the beach. His mother says what the sharks looking at the sharks.
Oops. I never get that right. Do you want to see the rule before we take a break? Yeah? Okay. Can you guess what this rule is? That is the only rule. There are no other rules. You can make anything happen. You can rediscover it. Just give us a truthful experience. Boom. You're up in review. I won't finish outline. Okay, so let's take a 5. Who smokes? Honestly, who smokes? Who's going on a smoking break? Okay, that's about 7 minutes. I'll see you back here in 7 minutes.